Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Evan Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
I didn't realize we were starting so proper this week. Oh, man. Hey, everybody.
I'm sorry, it felt... Here's the thing. Before we do any of the usual fun stuff that we do, I gotta get something off my chest, and it's something that just came across my desk as we were getting ready to record. And that is the indefinite delay of the film that was going to save cinema. Have you heard about this? Did you see this? Have you heard about this? Who am I?
No.
Like, weekend update?
No, what are we talking about?
So Tenet.
I liked it better the first time when it was called Inception. Sorry.
Oh,
You made a weekend
I
update,
liked
so
it
I had
better
to go
the
with
first time when it was called Memento.
Oh,
That's the better, like, reference, because it's about time moving in different directions for people. I don't think it's Inception. I don't think they go into dream worlds. Do they?
no, but I think it's like Inception in the filmmaking. So it's like it's like everything he wanted to do thematically with Memento and then like practically with Inception kind of all balled up into one is actually the way I've been describing this movie to people that don't know what they're like looking at.
Yeah, it feels to me like the slant sequel to Memento, a film that I've still never seen, but just the whole time moves differently for the Tenet agents of it all. Like, okay, cool, I guess. I don't understand what your movie's gonna be about. I'm gonna see it because
Yeah.
I saw Interstellar and Dunkirk, so I'll be damned if I don't go experience Tenet. But, as I said, if we were not in the darkest timeline, if we were in the standard timeline where coronavirus did not sweep the nation and the world,
Right.
this episode, more than likely, we would be talking about Tenet.
And that's putting it lightly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking like strictly in that. Like there'd be a whole host of other things going on, but the original release date for Tenet was July 17th because I'm like, oh, it can be Blank's birthday movie. And I love that. I love finding people's birthday movies because I guess I'm the only person who thinks it's fun to go to the movie theater on your birthday. But it's fun to think, like, that's my birthday movie. Mine was Escape Room. I ended up not going. I was
The
able to
saga of
escape
continues.
room. But yeah, so it's one of those situations where I had it, like, kind of drilled into my mind that I'd be seeing Tenet on July 17th. And in a strange way, it's sort of the last film release that I had on my mind was this. I can't think of any other, like, films where I knew the release date after Tenet and July
Yeah.
17th. I feel like that
And
was
I mean,
the
like,
last big one.
we shouldn't put too fine a point on this. Like we were joking about this earlier with Nolan and like what he's doing with his movie, but like Nolan has become an event director, right? It's like going to see like a Spielberg film at this point when you go to see Nolan. Like you're making your way to that theater, whether you know what you're in for, whether you like the last one or not. Like no matter your feelings on the previews that you've seen, you feel the need to go and see a Nolan movie now, right? And I feel like it's been that way for a while. You know, for a lot of people, it maybe started with The Dark Knight, or maybe that was like, but you know, I mean, we've talked about a man. We're talking about a man on a hot streak here. So like, there would have been reasons to go see this movie and for us to talk about this movie outside of you and I just being like movie people.
Exactly. This was a cultural one, and there's no bigger proof of this being a cultural one than when all the movie theaters shut down because of COVID-19. Everybody said, okay, but Tenet's coming out on the 17th of July. We need to make sure that we're open in time to have the film come out that day.
And more to the
gonna
point, all of the conversation about like online releases, very distinctly, it was until Tenet. Like this it wasn't even a consideration that this was going to be a release to like, you know, HBO Max or something like that, right? Like it was, yeah. So they were aiming for this date.
Right. They were aiming for this date so hard that Showcase Cinemas, who I'm still boycotting, was like, hard line in the sand, we're opening on the 10th of July. Like, before they had anything to support that as a date that they could open, they're like, we're going to have a week before Tenet comes out. And then AMC, very similar. The one that I go to sent me an email saying, by July 15th, we hope to be open so that you can see Tenet on the 17th. And then, no, the country was not ready for that. The world was not ready for that. So they pushed it back to July 31st. And then when when they found out, that's probably not going to work either, right? we're seeing upticks. We'll push it to August 12th. And now today, so the Monday that would have been after the original release of Tenet. And I think it's fine to do that because earlier this year we talked about, Justice League 2 was supposed to have come out
right
at some point this year.
Right.
It's interesting to think, look at this Monday where we would probably be talking about, was this box office smash, or, well, Tenet really underperformed. I guess the era of the Chris Nolan tentpole summer film is over.
Yeah.
Those are potential conversations that are not happening because of this delay. But the conversation that is happening is, you know what, we're not optimistic about movie theaters being able to open ever again. So let's just stop. And let's do what everyone else did back in April and say it's on an indefinite hiatus.
Yeah.
And that's huge in terms of entertainment.
Yeah. You talk about hard line in the sand. Like, Tenet became that in a lot of ways. I said it earlier, like the fact that it hasn't even been a consideration that it would be even a digital release. Like, they are adamant that this is going to be one scene in theaters. And like anybody that knows anything about Nolan, that shouldn't surprise you, right? Like, we're talking about the man that, like, basically he basically has made big screen filmmaking like an art again, like whether you like his art or not is another question entirely. But he is adamant about things like visuals and sound and all of that being specifically geared towards the cinema experience. Like, there's talk about what an asshole he can kind of be in the editing room, like literally leaning over somebody's shoulder, making them recolor the same scene 3 days in a row because it's just not quite blue enough or something. You know what I mean? Like there's these horror stories of working with him in some weird ways when he gets obsessed about like a specific sound effect that he needs in a specific spot and it's not quite resonating right. It's part of the reason why the conversation about Bane's voice is so interesting, is because it was impossible. I cannot stretch how hard it was to understand Bane in the pre-release scene that they had put out before. What was the one that, they did Dark Knight before I Am Legend. They did that same thing with Dark Knight Rises with the plane crash scene before something as well.
Yeah,
and I'd be damned if I can remember what it was.
I was like, I'm sitting here
in
thinking,
IMAX, in IMAX watching it. And it was impossible to hear him. And the conversation after that was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this movie's going to be unwatchable. At least fucking subtitle him or something. And he would never do that because that would ruin the visual oeuvre of his movie, right? That just wasn't a question either. So it was like pulling teeth to get him to like tone down some of the like distortion on Bane's voice in order to make him audible in theaters. And like, that was a huge thing because it became one of the few points where somebody stood up to him and said no, because otherwise you just didn't, right? Like in any other fashion, you just didn't.
My favorite story about the Bane voice, and then we will get back to the serious part of this discussion, is it was shot in Pittsburgh. The Dark Knight Rises was shot in Pittsburgh, and I have many friends in Pittsburgh. And outside of having many friends in Pittsburgh, because I have existing friends, you get warrants. You get like 1-hop, 2-hop warrants to meet other people who are in that area. And one night I spent at a bar drinking with people, hearing stories about when The Dark Knight Rises was filming there. And the most interesting part about that was people talking about, I was an extra, and that's how Bane talked on the set. Like, that's like we were doing the voice in Pittsburgh months and a year before the film came out because we had all ended up being extras and heard him talk like that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so interesting that it's like, Yeah, as much as like distortion and effect that they put on Tom Hardy's voice to get to that point that you're discussing, that was how he recorded it.
Yeah, I mean, he is he's an Oscar-worthy mumbler. I don't want to take anything away from Tom Hardy's ability to be incoherent. But there is never going to be a way, like, I don't think it's going to ever exist in any fashion for people to truly understand what it was being so excited after The Dark Knight and being like 10 times more excited for Dark Knight Rises, sitting down to watch that 10-minute scene and like having such a gut punch reaction to everything about the scene being phenomenal, except what the fuck was going on with, like, it was the weirdest disconnect. And I mean, like, to the point where like the studio had to step in. So this is the kind of filmmaker that we're talking about here. So to hear that he is the kind of guy that's like theaters or nothing, he was going to be the one to, as we were saying before, draw that line in the sand.
Right. And so much theaters are nothing that whenever I think of a Christopher Nolan film, the second thought I have, besides, am I going to go see this? The answer is usually yes. The second thought is it going to be worth seeking it out in 70 or 35 millimeter? Mm-hmm. Because he is someone who insists that it is shown that way, that is how it is meant to be exhibited. And mm-hmm. all power to him for that, because I don't think I would have enjoyed Interstellar half as much had I seen it digitally projected. And I'll be honest about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, he is an auteur in the truest sense, the same way that we talk about guys like Tarantino and Rodriguez. Like, he is that kind of director. It just so happens that he's a much more studio-friendly version of it, but he is still that. Well, you know, and like I compared him before to the likes of like Spielberg,
yeah, no,
which is exactly what Spielberg was, right? Like, he's an auteur. There's no denying that there's a Spielbergian essence to what he does, but at the end of the day, he also plays nice with the guys with the big money.
Right, and that might be his superpower, is right. that he is able to play nice with the guys with the money. I mean, look at him being a consultant on something like Man of Steel, and mm-hmm. even, I believe, not Justice League, Batman v Superman. Like,
yeah, and I believe that
in the room.
Stepped away was when Batman v Superman did what it did, and he was just like, all right, I don't want my name to be anywhere near these anymore, please. Yeah. He didn't want superheroes in the first place, but anyway, yeah, man, it's fucking Tenet. I mean, like, I am not surprised. I mean, it's catching me off guard that it's happening in this moment, but I'm not surprised.
No, I wasn't. Like, when I first read it, and I'm like, that makes sense. There's no reason why we should be opening movie theaters just because we arbitrarily said Tenet needs to come back. Yeah. But then I gave it that second thought to be like, oh, but it's an interesting time to be getting this news. And it is interesting, I mean, for what it means going forward. This was the first weekend where there weren't re-releases, it looks like, if you go to Box Office Mojo. Like, yep. last weekend, so the 10th to the 12th of July, the number one movie was Empire Strikes Back. The number one movie this week, I believe, was Relic. And even then, that grossed like total $812,000, and it's been out since the 3rd of July. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. And also, looking at something like Episode 5 of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, it was number one for its weekend where it was re-released, and it only made $611,000.
Yeah.
So, these are not huge money makers that were coming out, because people are not going to see movies. And I don't know, I mean, hopefully it's because of the whole pandemic thing, and not because, they'll just release at home and I'll see them that way.
I mean, I will say it's probably a healthy mix of both. You know what I mean? Like it's part of it is that where people are getting smarter and smarter about handling this quarantine life that we're in. But I do think that this is it, man. I mean, the world has changed.
Yeah.
Like, if you want one strong marker that things will never be the same after all of this, I don't know what the film world looks like after this, but it won't be the every weekend race to the first, like, and knock it down the next weekend type type move that it's been. Like, I mean, I kind of hope we go back to the days of like a big release gets a good month and a half in theaters before the next thing comes out. Like that would be kind of nice. You know, give me my home experience with my little indie films. You know, like something like so I watched this past week Marriage Story, right? Like just didn't need to see it in theaters, never pushed myself to go see it, and here I am watching it at home and I'm getting it, right? Whereas like Tenet, I'll be honest, I'd be kind of pissed if it came out this week because I'm not going to go to a theater right now with everything going on. And that would have meant I'm never going to get my chance to see it in theaters. This now at least gives me hope that, you know, maybe April of next year, things have calmed down. Maybe we've got some semblance of a vaccine either here or on the way. And like I can go outside again and do this thing and see it in theaters and experience it the way that I want to. I'm actually kind of, in a weird way, excited about this.
I don't think you're alone in what you just expressed. And I think that is specifically why they've decided against releasing it at all. Because they're understanding that there is this human element to it, that while there are people who are still willing to go out to the movie theaters, those are not necessarily the type of people who are always going to movie theaters. And they don't want to punish those people for wanting to remain safe during this uncertain time. Gosh, sorry, those words formed together in my mouth, and I can't believe they came out. Just because. Ugh.
No, I mean it's an interesting concept, right? Like right now, the kind of person that is out there consuming this kind of media in this fashion are the kinds of people that they wouldn't go see a Nolan movie otherwise. They're going to see it out of obstinance. Like it's like when somebody talks about like hate watching something and you're just like, okay, why are you partaking in this? Like you're clearly not doing it for the enjoyment of the thing. There's some other outside element that's bringing you here. And like whatever, more power to you, man. But clearly that's not the audience Nolan wants to speak to. This, I mean, going back to his whole, you know, the cinemaphile attitude about this shit. Like there is a specific type of audience he wants to experience this movie, and there's a specific way in which he wants them to experience it, and he's just not going to get that right now. So I totally understand him, and you know, we're putting a lot of this decision on him. Like, you know, maybe it wasn't so much. Maybe it was. I don't know. With a guy like Nolan, it could go either way. But like this makes sense. This makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I don't know. And also it's on the heels of Disney saying we're going to dump things to Disney Plus the same day that we release them in theaters, like for a September and October release. I don't even remember the names of those two films. They're certainly Ivan the Terrific, or it's Ivan the Great, or
Ivan the Great, based on the Applegate book, which is such a beautiful story. It's a weird, somewhat true story that was turned into a really good kids book. And Disney's just going to dump it online at the same time that it would have came out in theaters, which is interesting. It hits just that right note where like it could have been like a pretty decent Oscar winning, like Oscar push at least. I mean, but that's just not the atmosphere this year, and I think they're kind of reading the room the right way on something like that, right? I don't know, man.
We're going to be talking about streaming services a little later on, and actually this is probably going to be the transition into it. But Disney and what they've done with Disney Plus as this landing site for their new content is sort of genius.
I mean, they sort of by all accounts. And I am completely biased and had a hell of a good time with it, but I completely understand why people are feeling this way. By all accounts, Artemis Fowl getting the straight to release was kind of a blessing in disguise for that movie. I think that a lot of people involved with that film, including Disney themselves, would have taken a bit of a beating, shall we say, but from critics and fans, if that had come out as a wide release movie that everybody was focused on and talking about. They were able to kind of sneak it out in a weird way, right? So like, and in that, a lot of people were able to kind of just have their fun just enjoying it rather than being part of some big zeitgeist feeling of one way or another about it. So like Artemis Fowl kind of got a real good pass on this because of what's going on right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember John Carter of Mars, or just John Carter.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we look at someone like Warner who has HBO Max now,
Mhm.
and I would be very surprised if Tenet dropped there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. If it does, I think they would be smart to make it you need to have the subscription to this service, and there's also a premium there. I feel like that's how you build that. I don't know.
I don't know, man.
I wouldn't be
I will
happy with
say
that,
this.
but it's just one of those
I don't even know.
situations where
I don't
gate
even know
it.
how I'm gonna feel in like 3 months, though, right? Like, I think that's also part of this is time.
Yeah,
Right now, it makes total sense to put this movie off because of where we are in time, right? But like, come around Christmas, I might be singing a different tune. Like, if I'm just looking for something to fucking like watch, something good to sink my teeth into, and haven't been to a good movie in 8 months, it might be a completely different feeling for me. Because the other side of this is, I got a 50-inch 4K TV upstairs. I can experience this movie in a way. You know what I mean? Like, it's not impossible for me to get into like a big cinema feel for this thing. Yeah, I mean, like, so we'll see how he's feeling in September. We'll see how the studio's feeling in September, because this could be a completely different conversation if we're staring down the barrel of like, we thought we had a vaccine and it's not coming, or like, hey, we have a vaccine and it's only working in 10% of people. So like there's so many ifs about like things not movie related that are affecting movies right now, that like there's no real way to tell. There's just no real way to tell where we're going.
true. And it's one of those situations where back when it still had a date, back when it still had release dates,
Hmm.
that to me said this is never going to be released at home for home consumption. Now that it is an indefinite hiatus, I feel like that's step one towards Tenet will be released for home consumption on this date.
Yeah.
Especially when the secondary part of that conversation is we might release it outside of the U.S. in other markets.
Hmm.
And if that happens, you better believe that there are that subsection of people who are devoted to Christopher Nolan who will have no qualms finding a copy of it on the internet.
Yeah.
And this is not me condoning that. It is just a simple fact. And then it will still lose out on having those people pay to see this film, which is hopefully their ultimate goal, right? I mean, not that I
Yeah.
ever want to support capitalism in that way, but at the end of the day, don't they want to make money? Isn't that the gross part about this? Like, we want to make sure that we can still release Tenet so that we can have our big summer movie marketing push.
Yeah, well, the idiotic, optimist in me wants to support the idea that is completely impossible of conscientious consumerism, right? Capitalism with like a heart, and so like the idea that like we pay for movies because we want movies to get made, and the only way for them to get made is for people to pay for them, and like, it's a cyclical thing, right? So like, yeah, of course I want this movie to come out, and I want people to pay and go and see it, but also at the same time, you know when they have to hold it back like this after so long, and like it gets out there, whether they release it in other markets or not, if it gets out there, it's going to catch fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I am, who I feel bad for in all of this? Robert Pattinson. Like, man, dude was looking fucking baller in this movie. He looked like he had a real chance to be like the next JGL for this one, like people came out of Inception being like, fuck right, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like the fucking man. And then and there was such a chance for this one for that to be him.
Yeah, I have to be honest,
on the way and all that.
had no idea that he was in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding
Until
me?
today. Until today. No, I gotta be. Well, I mean, because I've only ever seen that trailer with the one guy who, like, you died and came back, and then Michael Caine, and I'm like, so that's how I know it's a Christopher Nolan film. Just like Jaws of the Revenge is a Christopher Nolan film because
Right.
Michael Caine's in it.
Of
Michael
course.
Caine's inexplicably in a movie. Christopher Nolan probably directed it.
I'm kind of confused why Nolan decided to direct Goldmember, but I'm glad he did.
Yeah, right? I mean, I think it needed that deft a touch. Let's be honest. It wouldn't have worked if it was whoever directed the other ones.
Considering the amount of stupid ass time travel in that movie, it actually kind of might have been directed by Christopher Nolan.
It wasn't. I mean, that'd be terrifying if it was. I mean, Memento's 1999, though, right? So it kind of fits into the timeline. Christopher Nolan does Memento, cuts his teeth working with the studio system on Goldmember, then brings us Batman Begins. This isn't true. This can't be true. I can't have just convinced myself that this is true. But oh my god, like, all of the evidence is there.
Yeah, man. No, like there was a lot of stuff with Tenet that I am really looking forward to, but in that, I still stand by the fact that like I'm willing to wait for it. And I hope that the studio realizes that there are going to be the movies out there that we're willing to wait for, and the ones that we're not feeling so hot on. You know what I mean?
You just released New Mutants. That's going to be my way of saying what Sejan just said. Yeah. I want to see New Mutants.
Honestly, you know what the big thing is with New Mutants right now is Disney probably can't figure out whether or not they want to put it on their app or Hulu, because apparently that's a big part of their whole fucking marketing strategy is figuring out the right app to put it on. It's like, just drop it, guys.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. And I think that then becomes a question of what do we do with the Marvel stuff? Because obviously they want to drop it on Disney Plus, but it's that same discussion of, but Disney Plus is sort of wholesome.
I mean, I'm very curious to see what happens with the likes of Black Widow. It was supposed to be this move in a very kind of, for lack of a better term, adult direction, you know, while still maintaining the Marvel universe, and really kind of, I think, be kind of like a proving ground for how close they could get with something like a Deadpool later on. And here we are now. That entire thing is up in the air, right? Like if they put it on Disney Plus, can they do that still? Can they really? Is Deadpool 3 going to come to Disney Plus? Of course not. Well, what is it? I don't know.
I don't know. Is Deadpool on there? No, but they just released Apocalypse, which is just as bad. I mean, for different reasons, but I was surprised when I'm like, ooh, X-Men Apocalypse is on Disney Plus. Maybe I wouldn't have done that. But people want to see it, right? It's crazy. But then you can't have a Marvel direct streaming service, as we've seen with DC Universe. As much as I enjoyed it for the brief time that I had it, and let's be honest, I'd still have it if my credit card information hadn't been stolen and I needed a new card.
Yeah.
And that's how I found out, was my DC Universe did not re-up. And I'm like, oh God, what's wrong with my credit card? I'm not in any rush to get it, and now that the only thing that really kept me there is on HBO Max, it seems redundant to have something like DC Universe.
Believe me, as somebody that's paying for both currently, it is redundant, and I kick myself every time I see the money come out for DC Universe, because I keep thinking I should remind myself to fucking cancel it. I'm still watching Harley Quinn. I gotta be honest. That is the reason I'm holding on to it.
See, but like, why isn't Harley Quinn just put on HBO Max?
I don't know. That's a good fucking question, Devin.
And you know what it could be? And here's the thing. Rather than have it as two separate things that you pay for, have it as a tier, like Disney Plus has with, you can get Hulu and ESPN Plus as a bundle. About that.
Why not have a Disney tier and a Marvel tier? Like, hey, you pay a little extra to get, or like break down the Disney price, bring that down to $5 a month, take all the Marvel stuff off and put it in its own thing and make that an extra $4 a month. For $9 a month, you can get them both. You know what I mean? Like,
and I'd be willing to pay that extra $2 a month to have all of the Marvel stuff in one specific place, and know that it's going to be able to not have to hew to these weird standards that Disney has put on Disney Plus.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that you have to do if you're going to do something like that, though, because it's going to look like shit at first. But if Netflix has taught us anything about the streaming world, you could look like shit for a couple of months, but people are still going to stick around long enough to suddenly praise you when it comes to be like awards time, right?
I don't know. You say that, but one of the reasons that Netflix was able to get away with looking like shit is that it was the only person on the dance floor.
That, I mean, like, that's not been true the last few times that they've had to do things like raise prices suddenly, or like break shit out in certain ways, or like catch shit for like having censored versions of things on there. Like they have caught their fair share of shit in the last few years, but tellingly, we don't really care that much because they're Netflix, right? Like, it's not that they haven't done some weird shit in the last few years. It's more that we just don't talk about it or focus on it. And they're not the only game in town anymore, you know? But like, you look at something like you look at the way that in which that they kind of just commit to something, and if Disney really wants to do this, they're going to have to commit to a couple of things. The first is that they've got to get a better system together in terms of UI. They have Hulu, ESPN, and Disney Plus as a package, but there's no like, you don't go to a hub and then from there go to something else, right? Like, they need to have like a Disney hub, and then from there, what do you have access to? Here's all your Hulu stuff, here's all your ESPN stuff, here's your Marvel stuff, here's your, your Disney. Maybe you do like a Disney Saturday morning, like, part of that. That would be fucking great, right? Like, break like DuckTales and everything off into that shit. Pixar, right? Make that its own thing. And so like, that's the other thing, is that it can't just be Marvel. You need to find what other branches you can add to this mix, because you really need to make it look appealing for people to do the mix and match, because they're already kind of doing that. It's just that the mentality isn't there. So you gotta play the looks. Like, you gotta look good doing this.
Right.
And so if they can design like a really good system that looks good, feels good, and like makes the consumer feel like they're more in control, which they will be, like, then they're going to be the ones to pull this off. Disney is the one with the money and honestly the library to do this in a way that nobody else really can.
Right, because HBO Max, when I logged into that for the first time and saw their like channels feature of like Crunchyroll and
Yep.
Criterion, I'm like, this is awesome, because I know what I'm looking for and I can get to it quickly. But then the issue is, you click on something like Crunchyroll and it's six items that are available.
You're right.
And it's
Yeah.
like, oh,
The other thing is that sometimes, I won't say it's happened often, but there's been a couple of things that I have found. The Cartoon Network and Adult Swim are the culprits here, where I have found items in searching or in like going through the rest of the app that for some reason don't show up in those collections. Like, those collections are curated in a really weird way, and so like it was just really kind of weird, because I came across like Regular Show one day, a Regular Show the movie I think is what it was, and I was like, that's fucking weird that it didn't show up when I go to the A through Z all feature of, and like, it's a matter of time. They just need to, they will get to the point where that is much tighter, but they're not there yet. Whereas like, if you're a Disney, you got the money and the manpower to be on that shit, right? Like, I'm sure that they could handle it in a way that's a little bit better, and a little bit easier.
yeah, I think I don't use Disney Plus near enough. I was going through all of the streaming services that I have at my fingertips today, because I added Apple TV. Today was the day I signed up for Apple TV.
Can I ask what specifically drew you to Apple TV out of all of them?
I upgraded my phone and got a year for free.
Oh, okay. No, okay.
So
All right.
that is no, that's a good question that you just asked, because I will be honest with you, if it wasn't, you can get a year of this for free, I would not be an Apple TV subscriber.
Mm.
I wouldn't. I mean, that being said, I'm probably going to watch Greyhound. Speaking of, theatrical releases dropped to streaming services, because that's one of the biggest examples of that that I can think of. Because Disney doing it's like almost makes sense that Disney would do it because they're Disney. But Greyhound going to Apple TV just seems so crazy to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a movie.
Yeah, I might end up having to get Apple TV eventually, because they're the ones that went all in to save DiCaprio and Scorsese on their latest movie. They very purposely snuck in behind Netflix and snatched that movie up. And right now, saying with the mantra like, we're going to make sure this doesn't end up on a streaming service, was literally what they said when they did it. Was they wanted to make sure that this was a film release, because of what happened with The Irishman, because apparently the world is really upset about what happened with The Irishman, and I don't know why, considering how successful it was and how good it is. But anyway,
if I hadn't been throwing up the day that I had planned to go see it in theaters, I would have seen The Irishman in theaters.
Exactly, right. But there's this like weird attitude around the ways in which that was handled, and like, the bad guys in that story are the studio system guys. I don't know if anybody actually is paying attention to that. They're all acting like Netflix is the bad guys or something like. But anyway, so Apple said, we're going to make sure that this ends up in a theater as Scorsese is meant to be seen. And now, lo and behold, we're talking about like movies won't exist anymore, right? So what I think they really intelligently were doing was reading the room and saying, if we get in and we get in on this and shit goes sideways like we all pretty much know it's going to, like we're going to have first dibs on where this thing goes. And like that is the one reason I'm paying attention to like Apple right now, is because they're making small moves like that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna watch the morning show because Steve Carell on Space Force. Like, I want to see more of him. I'm probably gonna watch Central Park, and I want to watch Rob McElhenney's show, which I'm not sure if it's Mythic or Mystic Quest. Because it's just, they're these shows that came out and I didn't have a deep connection to, so I'm not sure of the title because I was never going. And it's nothing against Apple, it was just one of those situations where I have enough streaming services right now. There's why get more.
You've named 5 things, and like I'm interested in personally in maybe 3 of them. Like that's the other thing is going back to what we were saying about HBO. The library is just not there for.
Yeah, I mean HBO. I'm watching Close Enough, and I'm going through the first season of Doom Patrol, so that when the entire second season is there, I can sit and just watch it straight through the way I did for the first season.
Nice.
Because that was one of my favorite memories of last year, was just sitting down and devouring 15 episodes of Doom Patrol in a row.
Yeah.
I felt so good. I'm not even I'm excited to do it again.
Right, but that's I mean that's kind of key here, man. Is like we can have, it's not the same experience as going to the movies, and we always knew it was never going to be the same as going to the movies, and that's what's been everybody's hesitation about kind of just like enveloping this new style of consuming. But at the end of the day, like it has its own enjoyment. It has its own benefits. There's a real love to being able to sit down and take in a 6-hour show at my own pace. There's a real sense of like, as an artist, getting to make that kind of material, knowing like, hey, this is Netflix. They signed me up for a 3-movie deal. They're probably going to film all 3 at once and then release them over the next 5 years. So like, let's do this thing, right? Like it's a whole new like type of consuming that I think is going to have its own ups and downs, and we just kind of have to accept that.
Right. The issue is when they filmed those 2 movies, those 3 movies, but then the interest isn't there, so they don't waste the bandwidth on the 3rd one. Like what we saw with the Divergent series, which just ended. They never did their 4th movie. That they didn't even do the TV film that was rumored for so long.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Mortal Instruments gets a fucking like 6-run season TV show after a trash movie. But anyway,
I can't talk about Mortal Instruments. I once read it at a New Year's Eve party because I was the only one uncoupled there.
It sounds like a real
found
good party.
A copy of it, and I'm just like, I'll read this book, and it was something. I only read the first one. I wasn't drawn to the world to keep going. But yeah, that was an interesting night of my life. And I would, as much as I love Robert Sheehan, who is in the movie, I'm never going to see that movie. But that's personal stuff. But you bring up an interesting point and stuff that I wanted to discuss. And that's a couple of the straight to streaming films that I've consumed over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, man.
So there's 2 that are like the big Megillah that I want to discuss. Do you want A or B? We can do it like the match game.
Oh, let's do B.
Okay. So the B film was our Thursday movie for the Deckers, and that was The Old Guard on Netflix.
Oh, man. Okay. Was not expecting that. Okay. Yeah, cool.
Why weren't you expecting it? I'm curious.
It's one of those. Okay, so The Old Guard is one of the downfalls of the streaming game right now, is that it feels like one of those movies that I had no idea what the fuck it was, just showed up on Netflix. Not unusual. That's how they play their game. And then like everybody's been talking about it, and it hit me kind of in the same way that like the first John Wick did, where I have this vague recollection of hearing somebody talking about Netflix filming this movie, a year ago, and then all of a sudden not only is it here, but it's like a fucking on fire hit. And like that was kind of wild. And so I was just surprised because, to be entirely honest, I just keep getting surprised every time it shows up in my life.
Cool. All right, I'm just making sure. It's by Greg Rucka, and I'm going to take this second to crow about Stumptown, because Stumptown is awesome, and you should be watching Stumptown.
Is it still a thing? I'm so excited if it is.
Yeah.
I thought it was one of the things that got like kind of canceled next in the madness.
Stumptown was one of the only shows that got renewed at ABC. And watch the 22 episodes that I believe are still available on Hulu. If not, find it, buy it on Amazon. It's so good. Stumptown is so good. And I didn't really like the comics. I had not read the comics beforehand, but you know, what I was doing 10 years ago was watching things and then reading the source material. And it's like how I realized that Kick-Ass is just a bad movie is a great story. The movie just didn't do that any justice. And then, you know, so I wanted to do that again. I'm like, I really like Stumptown. I'd like to read the source material, and it's not as good. And it's only because I've seen the adaptation, and the adaptation is far more kinetic than this. I mean, it's gorgeous. I will admit that the art is very good, and the story is the same basic story. It's just Colby Smulders, she's magic. As far as I'm concerned, she can do no wrong.
Well, and she's got Jake Johnson in that one with her too, right?
Who is another one of my favorite people. And Michael Ealy, who just like, I'm glad that he finally had a show that got picked up for a second season after Common Law and Almost Human.
Yeah.
Thumbs up for Stumptown. But this is another Greg Rucka property. It's based on The Old Guard, which is a graphic novel series. I kind of knew nothing about it going in. Dale chose it because of Charlize Theron. Because if there's one thing that will get Dale to watch a movie, it's Charlize Theron.
Especially with a sword in her hand. But
Dale loves Aeon Flux. We should talk about that on Save Report Jr. How she's like the one person.
No.
I love it too. I'm just...
You got a friend in me, Dale. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah. And like Atomic Blonde, you want to talk about a movie that was like John Wick, that felt like the female version of John Wick in its marketing and in its execution. So like, I was excited to see The Old Guard, and unfortunately, I wasn't a big fan. And that's hard for me to say when you consider Charlize Theron. I'm not Dale or Siegen levels, but I'm a fan. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Charlize. And Chiwetel Ejiofor is also in it. And I'm such a fan of Chiwetel Ejiofor, I know how to say his name. That's my flex. I have nothing more there than I can pronounce his name. And I know a bunch of people who don't know how to pronounce his name. And that's something.
I thought his last name was a Jolifer, but it's a Joylifer?
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Ejiofor.
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
So, but I didn't dig the movie. And unfortunately, as I found myself doing with all of these films that I have watched at home, that like I feel like this was probably always going to be a straight to Netflix movie, but it still gets that question of like, if I had seen this in the theater, would I have the same reaction?
I mean, we're going to be asking that for the rest of our lives, man. As people that like grew up in movie theaters, we're always going to wonder, would this have been better in a theater, right?
Right. And it's one step beyond when Tom Hanks like validates that. When someone like Tom Hanks is like, yeah, no, there are people who are like not rating movies the same that they would if they had seen them in a cinema. Yeah. Like, come on, Tom Hanks. It's one thing when I think it's a conspiracy theory. It's another when you tell me that it's happening.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't work for me. And the really disappointing thing is, I mean, I've watched 3 Netflix like original films during this whole quarantine thing. The first was The Irishman, which I enjoyed. I thought it was a little too long. That's like my thing. Probably never gonna watch it again. And like, that means something coming from me because I've seen Silence 4 times.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Silence, oh my God, I recommend Silence. I love that movie. I've done it here before, but like, So it's not one of those situations where, oh, Martin Scorsese makes long movies and I just kind of like struggle
Yeah.
through them. No.
You like you a good 4 hours of Scorsese. Yeah.
Yeah. His silence is incredible. And so Irishman didn't work for me. And then the one that did was the one that I thought, I'm not going to like this at all. And that's Spencer Confidential. Which, if you still haven't seen Spencer Confidential and you have an active Netflix account, go watch it right now.
Man.
Pause this and go watch Spencer Confidential. It's awesome.
I mean, it's an action comedy with Wahlberg in it, like, right? Like, I am thinking of the right movie,
and
right?
Winston Duke and Alan Arkin. Like, it's so many good actors in that film, and it's Spencer for hire. Like, it's so. How is it not going to be good? Was it Bokeem Woodbine is also in it? Like, you have nothing but a stacked cast in that film. I don't know. I just go watch Spencer Confidential. So then, like, one sort of miss. Like I said, I was entertained by The Irishman, but loved Spencer Confidential. So then I'm like, well, you know, Mark Wahlberg's co-star from The Italian Job signed me up. And it didn't work for me. And it's also one of those things, and I'm not going to, because it seems like you might have some interest in it. I don't want to spoil anything for you. I can come back to this one and have a discussion after you've seen it, because you haven't seen it, right?
No, I have not watched it yet. But I am definitely, I'm going to check it out. I mean, spoiler or not, I'm going to check it out, because it's not just, like, I'm not going into it just for the story. Like, it looks like just a fascinating movie to just watch.
Right. And that's where I was sort of at, is that, you know, I like these actors. I dig what I've sort of seen about it. And then I sat there for the 2 hours and was bored to tears because it was storytelling 101. Establish, reveal, continue. And I'm just like, that's not fun. And I don't know, and that right there feels like this is because you're watching it at home.
Yeah.
If you weren't at home, I think that you would be dazzled by the spectacle of the big screen and the loud music, and in the back of your mind, you'd still be having these thoughts about, oh, that guy's probably bad, or, oh, who's she going to end up being? But, you know, when you're at home and you're just sitting there where you watch literally every other piece of media that you experience, you're not overwhelmed. It's just another episode of Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
Which I'm not watching Gilmore Girls, but I overheard an episode, and I could never watch Gilmore Girls, is what that episode taught me.
What's the matter? You don't like the pseudo Sorkin that they all speak in?
No. It's not the pseudo Sorkin that bothers me. First of all, I've watched the first episode of Gilmore Girls and was like bored to tears. I'm just like, I thought this was going to be Ed, and it is not Ed.
No, it is not.
But that was everybody was comparing those two shows when they were new. That Ed and Gilmore Girls are like the same thing. And I once read an article of why Ed Stevenson should wind up with Lorelai Gilmore. And I'm just like, this is weird. And I read it, and I'm like,
it's called fanfic, Dev. That's where you read straight up fanfic.
But it wasn't fanfic. It was in a respected, like, entertainment journal. And I'm just like, this is strange. And it made me want to watch Gilmore Girls. And I watched the first episode and was like, not for me. Thanks for playing. Not for me. And the episode that I overheard, Luke and Lorelai is their first date. Spoilers, I guess, if you're a Gilmore Girls person. But the will they or won't they tease from the very first episode. Eventually they do.
Yeah.
I can think of very few shows that didn't make good on a will they or won't they relationship.
Did too much to their detriment, usually.
You know what? You say that, but the one that always jumps to mind is Cliff Clavin and Carla from Cheers.
Yeah.
Like, there's like a real, like, it feels that for sometimes they wanted to push those two characters together. Like, if that ended up being the end of the story, they would have been completely happy with that.
Awesome.
And I'm just like, no, you guys did the right thing by not making that happen ever. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to throw out there before we move on from the streaming stuff, or to your other movie, I
Yeah,
should say,
yeah.
that like the first thing I think of whenever somebody talks about all this streaming stuff, like the very first movie that comes to mind is Timmy Failure from Disney. Like it was such a, I'm so lucky that it was one of the first things that I really like kind of watched in this world, in this new mentality of like movies um coming to streaming services right out of the theater. And like it was even and what's weird is it wasn't really part of this conversation. It was more just part of the earlier conversation that we were having, is like, how is streaming going to work in this environment with movies and Disney now owning things and Warner now owning things and stuff like that. And like, so it was like a weird prologue to then suddenly fucking COVID coming along and forcing the issue. And Timmy Failure was just such a eye-opening experience because I enjoyed the hell out of it, and didn't even once think of the conversation of like, did I need to see this in a theater in order to enjoy it? I just enjoyed it, and it was just good. For so long it's been kind of a weird point for me with movies on like Netflix and even Hulu and stuff like that, where people have been like, oh, like it's not getting the credit it deserves. It should, if it was in theaters, this wouldn't be the conversation, like all this other shit. It was the first time I didn't even think of that conversation. So like, take that for what it means. Like you had just mentioned earlier, that thought of, would I have enjoyed this more if it was in theaters? And I have had that for sure, but I have also had the exact opposite of that.
Right. And that's sort of where film A comes into it.
Yeah.
Because the other movies that I've done in quarantine that were meant for the big screen was The Way Back, the Ben Affleck basketball movie that I didn't enjoy. And I don't know if seeing it in theaters would change the fact that the first hour of that movie is a different movie.
Right.
The Trolls World Tour, which I definitely think suffered by not being seen in a big auditorium with the big sound system, and Scoob, which is Scoob. That's the
Scoob.
thing.
Scoob is Scoob. Scoob is Scoob. I enjoyed the hell out of Scoob, and I worry I might not have in a theater. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing. I think the only sad thing about Scoob coming directly to streaming is that it was going to be the director's first theatrically released film, because he is responsible for most, if not all, of the direct-to-DVD Scooby-Doo films.
Right.
And they're like, so you've proven yourself, we're going to give you a theatrical Scooby-Doo movie. And like, I was happy for him.
I mean, and it's a super
that
fun.
was gonna
It
happen.
actually, it makes sense that he was the director of the straight to DVD ones, because it's a fantastic Scooby Doo story, and it's like super fun in the world of Hanna-Barbera. It's just that like, it doesn't have any hooks to it. Like, there's nothing that's going to get anybody into that movie that isn't already sold on it by knowing what it is. You know what I mean? Like, so it was great for me, but like, I don't know if I would have enjoyed listening to everybody around me going to the theater expecting something and being disappointed,
Yeah, that's like, it's not a great Scooby-Doo movie, but it's a fantastic Hanna-Barbera universe love letter.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I think seeing it at home, I'm like, well, I was able to enjoy that for what it was. But in a theater, I don't know if I would walk out of it and be like, yay. Or if it would be like, I like Captain Caveman, but I've always liked Captain Caveman. That's just part of who I am.
More props to Mark Wahlberg as young
Blue Falcon.
As young Blue Falcon.
Yeah.
I was trying to prove himself to his dad. The switch in dynamic between Dino Mutt and Falcon being the idiot, and Dino Mutt actually being like the hero, or at least the but go see the movie.
Go see it. Yeah, see Scoob. It's on HBO Max. If you have HBO Max, you can watch it for free right now. And it's interesting, but it is one of those situations. I'm very happy that I watched Harvey Birdman before seeing Scoob.
Nice.
Is like the real headline.
Yeah.
Is, if you liked Harvey Birdman, you'll probably enjoy Scoob. But this all brings me to the film that I watched a week ago. And this is a film that I was excited for at least a year. This is a film I was super excited to see. In fact, if you go back a year, I talked about a movie featuring the guy who's in this film, and I hated it. And I was fearful that, as bad as Stuber was, it might affect My Spy.
Oh, man.
And My Spy dropped on Amazon Prime 2 weeks ago. and this is a movie I wanted to see, but it was delayed from its, I believe August 12th release date, ironically enough, with Tenet, and then it was supposed to come out in April. It finally had an April release date before they're like, yeah, know what? We need to drop this movie, right? Because David Bautista, people are forgetting who he is.
Every day he starts fading away more and more.
Every day, more people forget about David Bautista, and that's sad because he's awesome. You want to see the Escape Plan movies, the sequels? The first Escape Plan is excellent on its own, but 2 and 3 live and die on the back of Dave Bautista. I have no problem saying those words. So they dropped My Spy, which is a movie that I was very excited about. And I'm happy because I get to close the book on the speculation regarding if Stuber's, dump, for lack of a better term, is the reason why My Spy got delayed. Is not. Would you like to know why My Spy got delayed from its August 2019 release?
I have to imagine there was a plot point in it or something that was probably going to be tender, but no, what was it?
Okay. You're sitting down, right? You're not one of these people who has a standing desk to record their podcast.
No, I want to be that guy, but I'm not.
It's fine, but even if you were that guy, I would say please take a seat because I can't have you fainting on this. Because when I tell you why My Spy was delayed in 2019, you're not going to believe it. I don't believe it. And I have found corroborating evidence.
Corroborating evidence.
Corroborating evidence.
All right, Baba
I'm
Walters.
Baba Walters. I like that we did the same joke. That was fun. There's a reason we do a podcast together, ladies and gentlemen. The reason is STX, the distribution company behind My Spy, didn't want to release 2 films in August and have them compete against each other. Do you want to take a guess as to what the other film was, Jim?
STX?
Yeah.
Was it The Hunt or something? What ridiculousness were they involved in?
The Playmobil movie.
Oh, man.
My Spy got delayed from August 2019 to April 2020 and then eventually released straight to Amazon Prime because STX was like, we can't have anything competing with the Playmobil movie.
Oh, they banked on the wrong horse, man. I mean, if they had gone the other way, I think they would have been in a really good position. If My Spy had come out last year in theaters, and then Playmobil was the one that they just had a drop on Amazon Prime, man, imagine the world we'd be in.
Imagine that world, right? Maybe that's the world where Tenet came out last weekend.
Oh man.
I mean, again, this is all hypotheticals, and I don't think that would have been the change. But if a butterfly flapping swings. That could be it. That could be the change.
I saw My Spy and I developed the cure for COVID before it ever even happened.
I realized that love and friendship is necessary.
So here's the thing. You need to tell me how you feel about this movie because I like that you watched the Charlize Theron one thinking, oh, this is going to be interesting. And then actually your biggest knock against it is it's just not interesting. It's actually kind of formulaic. Meanwhile, the big dude who ends up in a house full of kids is the most formulaik thing for a ex-wrestler to do.
Oh, are you referring to The Spy Next Door?
Mr. Nanny,
what the heck? The pacifier. I couldn't think of the pacifier. Playing with Fire with John Cena.
The Game Plan, The Tooth Fairy.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. All of those movies that exist. Kindergarten Cop. The trope creator, for lack of a better thought.
Yeah, but I mean, big guy, little kids is always
Suburban Commando. I had to bring up Suburban Commando. Yeah, My Spy is friggin' awesome. My Spy is one of the best films that I have seen this year. Awesome. My Spy is in heavy contention against Spencer Confidential for best film I watched in quarantine. And I am not being hyperbolic. I am being 1,000% serious.
I'm
because
excited, man. It makes me. I already wanted to see it because I mean, this is Dave Bautista, and then thought, oh, I might not ever see this movie now that it's just a release in it's the kind of movie that I want to drop $10 to go see in a theater so that I can like be happy with myself that I did that. I was the one that spent the money on that movie, and like the fact that it wasn't going to be in theaters, I'm not going to lie, it kind of made me think I don't know if I'm ever going to watch it without that hook for me. So I'm now back in. I'm back in.
yeah, last Monday I woke up and was like, we're watching this movie. I can't go any longer without watching My Spy. It has to happen. And I will say this, and I don't be looking for it, but someone once told me they enjoyed The Pacifier because of the twist in The Pacifier.
Yes, yep. Okay.
And that is what got me to watch The Pacifier, and I was like, well, damn, that was a pretty solid twist in The Pacifier. This film, My Spy, has a Pacifier level twist that I did not see coming. And I will also say that the creators of My Spy...
I hate you so much.
Why do you hate me? Because you're going to watch My Spy?
No, never mind. Let's keep moving on. Anybody that's seen The Pacifier knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you can hate me, but it's true. The fact that was someone like, I didn't think I'd like The Pacifier. And then big twist. We could talk about the twist in The Pacifier.
Oh, it's fine.
We
already have. Anybody listening closely knows we already have.
That's true. That's very true. But yeah, it's one of those situations where the creators of My Spy, in addition to like obviously knowing the tropes of big guy, little kid, and like this is a movie that has existed and will continue to exist, are also huge fans of movies in general. Cool. Like shot composition, direct references, homages to other sequences from other films. Like it is an Easter egg hunt for cinephiles.
Cool.
And it was awesome. The only issue that I have with this movie is that one of them was like this glorious like reference, and then you have one of the characters be like, oh, this is very familiar. And I'm like, it was fine without you saying that.
Don't draw attention to it.
The whole rest of this movie, you trusted us to like go along with it. Why at the end did you have someone mention what was going on? But still, very happy that I finally got to see it. Wholly recommend it. And this is one of those films that, like, I was so amped to go see it. I was like, day one, I'm going to be in the theater. I'm going to see My Spy. And I didn't get to do that, but I got to watch it at home, and I still enjoyed it. Which is sort of the central thesis of this whole discussion. And that is, your enjoyment of something probably is based more on the person that you are and less where you saw it. Does that make sense? I mean, it's not 100% one-to-one. I think that I probably would have liked The Old Guard in theaters. I know that I would have liked Trolls World Tour in theaters. And I doubt that I would have given Scoob as much leeway if I had seen it in theaters. But, you know, I feel like I've gotten to that place where I'm able to divorce myself from it. Or at least I thought I did when I saw My Spy. And then I watched The Old Guard. And we can talk about it as soon as you see it. But I'm very interested to see how you approach it. Because it's not even just formulaic. It's like, there's formulaic, and then there's, like, you're not even foreshadowing. You just told me a plot point that's gonna happen.
Yeah, that's not foreshadowing. That's show, don't tell, you assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that, I mean, that's been the big thing over here. I can't think of anything else that I really did. Oh, I finished Curse of the Moon 2 100%, which required a playthrough of the game as just Zangetsu in the final episode mode, which is awesome. I'm now that I've done that, you go to the moon, right? You still go to the moon, but when you're just Zangetsu, you get an upgrade that gives your sword all of his Zangetsu powers, and the final boss, instead of just like climbing past a bunch of carcasses, you have to kill those things.
Oh man.
Like, you're the reason those carcasses are there. If everybody goes to the moon together holding hands, friendship is magic. So
Fucked up. Excellent.
it's awesome. It's pretty great. And I will say, a lot of people have complaints about it. My big complaint about Curse of the Moon 2, and I may have said it last week, but I do want to reiterate it this week, is that it requires a minimum of 2 playthroughs for that game to shine the way that it should. Yeah. For it to become Mega Man X, which is what I think they always wanted to do with the game. But then people were like, but it's not like the original game.
Yeah, they keep it behind a gate. Yeah. It reminds me of the Fez conversation. I was actually thinking about this after we recorded last week, where like when the Fez first came out, there was a good amount of time of people just bashing on it because they just felt like it was so simplistic and there wasn't much of a game there, and couldn't understand why some people were like, no, keep playing, no, keep playing. And now, you know, years out, we look back on it as like this like masterpiece in flipping the script. But like at the time, you know, it's hard to convey that there is a reward to keep going when you're trying to keep it, you know, a secret, for lack of a better word, right? And it can be hard to like to convince people to be like, no, there's a reason why I like this game. You got to keep going. Yeah.
I mean, and one of the things that I think of on that is I've been watching people learn it to speedrun, and they are either learning the first episode, which is easier bosses, or they're learning episode X, which is harder bosses, but you have the moveset of Miriam, Alfred, and Jeeble, which just makes for, like, faster movement speed in the game. Yeah. Nobody is talking about speedrunning final episode. And the big issue with that is that because it's randomized, there's no guarantee that you're going to have the same setup every time.
Yeah.
And that is detrimental to a game being speedrun. And unfortunately, in the world that we currently live, these type of games, they're not so much indie games, right? Because it's not like it was one guy in a room who made this, but it's not necessarily a AAA release.
No, we're back to the AA and B tier games, man. It's been a long time. We have missed you. Welcome back to the party.
But these games, let's say B tier, because I don't like AA. Like, I don't really understand AAA. Honestly, right?
It's business score ratings.
I know it's business score ratings.
Right. No, but like nobody ever thinks about that shit outside of talking about video games like this, and that's stupid. Yeah. You're right to call it out.
Yeah. But like it's a B game is much like a B movie, where like there's definitely going to be an audience for this, but it's not by Ubisoft, right? Like that's pretty much it. And these games, these B-tier games, they live and die by the speedrunning scene that grows around them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people would still be talking about Streets of Rage 4 if there weren't people running it regularly. And, you know, it's so disappointing to me that this game has that speedrunning thing, but the mode that I think is the most rewarding is like they're not touching it. So like it might never be touched as a result of that. I don't know.
You should do it, man.
What? Yeah. Maybe
Seriously.
I will. Maybe I will. Who knows? The boards are locked till the 24th. Which I gotta say, like in terms of speedrunning thing, the fact that speedrun like leaderboards don't open for 2 weeks is probably the one thing that I love the most. Because it gives you 2 weeks to actually enjoy the game.
Well, enjoy the game and gives everybody a fair chance to learn it, because we've talked about your ability to fucking like speed read a game, right? Like you can jump in there, got it good, and not everybody is able to get to that level immediately, but there are people out there that can get to that level eventually. And I think that locking the leaderboards really is geared more towards that mentality, right? Like, let's give everybody a chance to get good before we throw them into the pool. It's because we don't want to turn people off.
Well, there's that, and they also don't want to be like authenticating 15,000 runs because everybody's submitting right now because we don't have a baseline. And it's also these 2 weeks where the leaderboards are locked are fun because I'm watching these guys who ran the first Curse of the Moon game go to each other's streams and discuss like movement techniques because they really want it to be like a good competition when those boards open up.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's just good sportsmanship.
Yeah, it's cool. It's this thing that I didn't really get to see with Streets of Rage 4 because everybody was just complaining about that game. This game, there are complaints, but the complaints are more geared towards we can't run final episode because it's random. It's not complaints like super armor is stupid.
Yeah, man.
But that's it. Is there anything you'd like to add? I think I've gotten everything I was on my chest off of it.
No, I mean we've gotten to the end of this thing. Definitely been diving into some really good streaming stuff. You know what's really interesting that we don't actually talk about a lot, and I do not mean YouTube TV when I say this. Straight up YouTube. We kind of touched on it a few weeks ago when we mentioned like some of the channels that they have available that have been doing some really interesting original stuff. But I don't even know if I've told you this yet, Dev. But did you know they dropped the entire series of Taskmaster on YouTube? Like 7, 8 seasons of that show on YouTube.
No, I had no idea.
It's an entire channel dedicated to itself. Every episode of every season is up, including some stuff that they've done in quarantine. They've done home tasks that they've been like assigning and like letting people send in like America's Funniest Home Videos style versions of them doing it. It is phenomenal. It is like anybody looking for like a really nice laid back watch. It is the most. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Like, it's the most low investment, high reward thing that I think I have found in the streaming scape, and that's straight up just YouTube. Like, people have been using YouTube channels to a further extent than we used to. YouTube is not the animal that it was 15 years ago for sure, and it's kind of not the animal that it was 2 years ago anymore. You know, it's not just streamers, it's not just people on there hawking shit like trying to get you to buy NordVPN. Like there is some stuff that's been released to just YouTube flat, like just vanilla YouTube, that has been kind of getting me through some of this stuff. Yeah, I discovered it one day by accident about 3 weeks ago and had been watching it myself. And the girls and I had watched the American version, also very good, not on not on there noticeably. But if you can find the 6-episode version with fucking Reggie Watts as the Taskmaster and still Alex Horn as his sidekick, but super good. The American version was a very good introduction to that show. So we loved that when that had come out a year or two ago. And they caught that I had been watching the British version, and I didn't think they'd care because the people on the British version are like, you know, for the first couple of seasons especially, aren't really known to anybody that's not, you know, super into like British like soap operas and news and shit like that. Like it's a very, very, very British show for the first couple of seasons. But you know, eventually they get the likes of like Noel Fielding on. I think Stephen Merchant is a contestant at some point. I mean, the reason to watch that show are Greg Davies and Alex Horn, though, as the hosts. So just we're talking about streaming stuff out there, and this is something that is legitimately available to anybody with a phone. Like, go watch Taskmaster.
I have written down one word after what you have just told me, and that is what next episode is going to be about. It is related to YouTube. It is related to our personal histories together, and I am excited to have this discussion. It is on my monitor, on a Post-it note, so be excited for that.
Okay, man. I am excited.
Taskmaster, that I really do enjoy Taskmaster, I'm not going to lie. But what I am going to talk about while we talk about YouTube is we are at a sticky situation where television networks have realized that YouTube is a thing that they can sort of weaponize in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
And that is with a new show on TBS called Celebrity Show Off. Are you familiar with this at all?
No, I could probably cobble together a guess of what it's about, but go for it.
I'd like to hear your guess as to what it's about. Honestly.
So it's a very European style of game show in that they don't have regular contestants, but instead have celebrities come on, sometimes play for charity, sometimes just for laughs. So like I feel like there's celebrity contestants, Celebrity Show Off. First of all, it sounds like Jane Lynch probably is the host of this show. Don't correct me yet. And I'm gonna guess that they do like what's the show where they used to say like I've got a weird talent and you had to guess whether who of the
What's
three
My
people,
Line
what's
or
my line or
To
something like
Tell the
that.
Truth?
Yeah,
Those are the
something
two
like
shows
that.
that you just described.
Right. Essentially, like you have celebrity contestants come on, they do something weird, or one of them can do something weird, and then everybody has a good time watching celebrities make idiots out of themselves for a half an hour every night.
No, that's actually Game On, which is
Oh,
awesome. Game On is Rob Gronkowski and Venus Williams, along with their teammates Bobby Lee and Ian Carmel, respectively, along with one guest each week. And they compete in physical challenges or sports trivia things. It's all hosted by Peel, not Peel, Michael Keegan Key, right?
nice.
Keegan Michael
Yeah, yeah,
Key.
yeah. Also
He's
got
the
brain
host.
games. He's
Yeah.
doing the game show
Yeah, he's
circuit.
doing game show circuit, and it's Game On is awesome. I look forward to it each week. It reminds me a lot of 8 out of 10 Cats, and I don't know if that's
Nice.
proper. Like, I haven't watched enough 8 out of 10 Cats before
Another
it
show
became
available on YouTube, by the way.
yeah, which that's a great show. But I haven't watched enough of it before it became like it went through the Brundle device with Countdown. Like that really changed that show. By all accounts, but it reminds me of that in that it's these celebrities and a guest each week doing this stuff, and also like which of these is this, put them in order from most to least. So it's an interesting show. But no, Celebrity Show Off is not hosted by Jane Lynch, though I can't fault you for thinking that it would be. It is actually hosted by Mayim Bialik, a.k.a. TV's Blossom or TV's Amy Farrah Fowler, depending on which generation you're a part of.
Oh, God, she was so good as Blossom. Why do you have to bring that up?
Well, because the only reason that she is a host of this show is because of Big Bang Theory. It's on TBS. They show Big Bang Theory all the time.
Yeah, so she's like a darling.
So
Yeah, I get it.
It's one of those situations
and
where...
she's a fantastic person, so like I'm not going to fault her
and
for
she's
doing
great
good work.
hosting the show. And what they did is they have 5 celebrities that they sent out all of the equipment required to shoot a TV show at home. And the 5 celebrities put together like 11-minute episodes of a TV show, and then they show the episodes, and then the last 11 minutes is dedicated to... These episodes are also available on YouTube, and whatever gets the most views, likes, and comments is the #1 show each week. And then the bottom 2 shows, they are voted... One of them is voted off. And then they put in another celebrity to compete.
Oh, man. That's pretty rad.
And it's going to run for 10 weeks. So far, there have been 4 episodes. I've been watching American Dad. Like, hats off to American Dad for like having a new episode each week during quarantine. I'm thank you so much for that, American Dad, from Devin Decker.
Am I wrong? They've been going ham, right? Like, haven't they been going like straight for some odd number of weeks?
They took, I believe it was a 3-month hiatus. Yeah. I think their last episode was in December of last year, and then they came back the middle of March this year.
And they've just been every week since the middle of March, right?
Yeah, and that's what they've decided to do, is that like people watch it. When we have a new episode, people watch it. So they take those 3 months to produce like a season and a half worth of content and then release it that way.
Yeah,
so
wild. Yeah,
it's crazy. And I didn't realize it until today when I was like, oh, I have American Dad tonight, that I'm like, I've had American Dad every Monday night that I could watch. And during this uncertain time for entertainment, that is awesome. And I've come to rely on it. But I'm watching that, and I saw a commercial for it. And the people who are competing are Jason Mraz and Ja Rule and Tori Spelling, Kevin Smith, and Bella Thorne. Like, those were like the first people who competed on the show.
Okay.
Come to find out, the Rumor sisters, not the Rumor sisters, the Willis sisters. So Rumor Willis and her 2 younger siblings, they were in the first episode, but then they were no longer in quarantine together, so they felt it was unfair for them to continue.
Oh, okay.
Even though that they had done 2 shows that were up on the YouTube channel, and it's interesting because like the whole thing is go to YouTube and watch these things, and then watch the weekly roundup where they show the same things that you saw on YouTube, and then you have the reactions of the other 4 contestants and Mayim, and then they decide who stays, who goes, and introduce a new competitor. And the new competitors have been like Diplo, Nene Leakes,
Man,
and Travis Kelce was announced to be the one added this week. He's from the,
I like Chiefs. The idea that they're not just pulling from like TV people. Like it's much more interesting to me asking somebody like Ja Rule to try and make an 11-minute series than it is to ask somebody like, it's not like handing the fucking thing over to like, somebody from like Always Sunny or some shit like that. Like, here, hey, Charlie Day, like make an 11-minute episode or something.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, Ja Rule, his 4 episodes, very good, and they're still available on YouTube. And I recommend definitely his first one and his 4th one. I could see why people might think the 2nd and 3rd are a little weaker. He was in the bottom every week except for the first week, which makes me sad because Ja Rule, turns out he's hilarious. Something I never realized.
Yeah, you kind of have to have a good sense of humor about things considering the way that his career went.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just this really interesting thing where I hadn't seen YouTube employed in that manner yet. Yep. And I honestly think it's one of those situations where necessity, bred innovation. Because I don't think this was a show that was going to happen before we were all in quarantine.
No, man. It doesn't sound like it, right? Or if it was, it wasn't going to be this. It was going to have a very different feel to it with like a studio section to it and stuff like that. That clearly is not possible, right? Yeah, no, that's fucking wild. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I do recommend it, even though like Kevin Smith and I we had a weird thing last year. Not like I had some weird thoughts about Kevin Smith. I said that like Kevin Smith and I had a fight, but we didn't. I'm not Ben Affleck as much as I may claim to be in my bio. I wish that were true. I wish my bio was just Ben Affleck's bio with all the Bens changed to Devin. Sometime I'll have to do that.
Marriage to J-Lo was considered.
In 2004, Devin made Geely. Because I did make Geely in 2004. Little known fact, everybody.
I was going to make a very crude joke, and I have not. We have gotten to the end of this episode, Devin.
Yeah, it is. This is the end of the episode. But you brought up YouTube, and I've been specifically spending time with something that has made YouTube a bigger deal in my house. Mm-hmm. Like my father, for entertainment, goes to YouTube now. And I don't think that would have happened before we started watching Celebrity Show Off. Like, not for entertainment. Yeah. Like, he was using it for news about cruising. And now he legitimately watches it for entertainment. It's like Mayim Bialik told him, there's funny things on YouTube too, Dennis. And he went right to it and found it all. It's insanity. But that's enough. If you have any recommendations for my dad on what to watch on YouTube, please contact me at Devin D. Decker on Twitter.
And if you have any other suggestions for quarantine movies to watch, especially streaming, so that we can kind of really start digging in, hit me up at Siege versus the World.
All right. So until next time, Will, what kind of day has it been?
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.